João Pedro, let's continue to this now. As South Africa continues to commemorate Women's Month, the Institute for Economic Justice is asking a fundamental question. Who carries the economy? The organization argues that conversations about women's empowerment must go beyond representation and individual achievement to examine the economic structures shaping women's lives. Its 2026 campaign places women, care, and economic policy at the center of the discussion, highlighting issues including social protection, unpaid care work, and women's financial autonomy. Well, to unpack this approach, we're now joined by Dr. Kelle Howson. She is the Basic Income Project Lead and Senior Researcher for Women's Rights and Social Security at the Institute for Economic Justice. Dr. Howson, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So, I want us to start with, the IEG's fundamental question: who carries the economy? I mean, unpack this question for us in terms of how does it, specifically place women at the center of that very important conversation around inequality, economic justice, as well as, of course, just freedom, financial freedom for women.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So, we often don't think of work done in the home, predominantly by women, as actual work. We have this bias towards what is thought of as productive work, work that is paid in the economy. But actually, the nation's caregivers, those who spend their time raising children, caring for community members, older relatives, sick relatives, make an enormous contribution to the economy. Particularly, raising children is building the future workforce, and domestic work, cleaning the house, preparing food, taking care of those who go out to work is also a very important contribution that keeps our economy going. But this kind of work isn't recognized within our formal structures of how we value work, how we remunerate work. The vast majority of work in the home is not paid. And because it's performed predominantly by women, this leaves women in a very precarious economic situation. If you're caring full time for a child, it's harder to go out and participate in the labor market and earn an independent income. So those who do care work in the home are disadvantaged economically, and often forced to rely on others to meet their financial needs, or rely on inadequate state support systems.
Yeah, when we look at just some of the things on the table, I want us to focus then on, basic income. You also focus on the basic income project lead. Why do you see universal basic income as a woman's economic justice? And I suppose second to that, how could a basic income strengthen women's financial independence and their ability to make decisions about their own lives?
Thank you. So, a universal basic income would go some way to compensating this unpaid care work that gets done in the home. If everybody has a certain level of financial security, has their basic needs met through a social assistance transfer from the state, that would enable women to, or not only women, but enable caregivers to undertake that caregiving role without having to sacrifice their basic needs, without worrying where their next meal is going to come from, and without having to use the child support grant to subsidize their own needs, thereby removing or reducing the amount of support that's available for children. So
Yeah.
we think that the universal basic income grant is critical to achieving women's empowerment and financial independence and enabling them either to participate in the formal economy or to take care of children whilst ensuring that their needs are met.
Just unpack how that would look like, in terms of a universal basic income. How would that practically look like?
What we are advocating for, and I should mention that the IEJ is part of the Universal Basic Income Coalition, which includes a number of other civil society organizations in
Yeah.
South Africa. And what that group is calling for is for the social relief of distress grant, the 370 grant, to be made permanent, to be improved to an adequate level, to the upper bound poverty line, and to be extended to all adults within the 18 to 59 age group.
Mm.
Um, the Constitution requires the government to progressively realise the right to social assistance, and we see expanding the SID grant into a comprehensive system of basic income support as the most immediate, obvious, and achievable way to meet that constitutional obligation.
Yeah. Your research also points to, a number of challenges, digital, financial, and administrative barriers that can exclude people from, social assistance. What are some of those barriers that women face in accessing, grants and other support? And also, perhaps, just explain to us in terms of how else could then government circumvent this barrier?
Mm. So right now, the social relief of distress grant is very narrowly poverty targeted. You only qualify for the grant if you have income less than 624 Rand per month, which corresponded to the 2022 food poverty line, but has now fallen significantly behind the food poverty line. So that in itself serves to exclude many people who are in need and who are in poverty. But the systems that the state uses to verify eligibility also have the effect of excluding millions of people, and women are particularly vulnerable. And that's because SASSA, the South African Social Security Agency, monitors every applicant's bank account every month. And any monetary inflows that come into that account above that threshold of 624 Rand are used to disqualify that applicant. Now, women are much more likely to receive financial support intended for dependents in their care, like child maintenance from the fathers of their children, or money intended to support aging relatives to buy medication. And this system excludes women from access to the social relief of distress grant if those kinds of funds show up in their account.
Yeah.
So it's inherently discriminatory, and it particularly impacts women.
Yeah, I can't remember or recall where I actually saw this study, but it found that more than 50% or so, or just close to 50% of women now taking care of households all by themselves. Perhaps, maybe as we end off our discussion, if you can address this often jobs versus grants debate in South Africa. And when you look at some of those studies that show you just how important a woman's role is, maybe help us with that argument, of jobs versus grants. Why does the IEJ argue that unpaid care work needs to be part of this conversation? And if essentially it's so important and crucial, just given the fact that, women in these environments take care not only of households, but oftentimes of the community.
Mm. Exactly. The jobs versus grants trade-off is something we hear about all the time, and we always push back on that to say that it is not a trade-off. We need both jobs and we need social security. And in fact, social security has a vital role to play in getting people into the labor market where appropriate. If you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, if you can't afford a taxi fare, if you can't afford data to apply for jobs or to print your CV, how are you going to engage in job seeking activities? So we know that the SID grant, for instance, does support people to go out and search for jobs. But when people are stuck in pure survival mode without any social safety net, it's much harder to participate in the economy, and to get into work. But at the same time, there are many people who should not, who have valid reasons not to participate in the formal economy. So when we say If you're receiving a social grant, you're dependent on the state, you're lazy, you're not willing to improve your circumstances. That completely disregards the reality of caregivers, particularly women who need to spend their time caring for children. So
Yeah.
Social Security has a vital role to play in enabling care in our economy and in helping to support the workforce as well.
Absolutely, Dr. Kelle Howson, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Howson is the Basic Income Project Lead and Senior Researcher for Workers' Rights and Social Security at the Institute for Economic Justice.
We are